Hi, this is Nelson Coulter. I will be the lead learner with you all this term while we engage in the learning journey that we at LSUS affectionately call EDL740, the Introduction to Graduate Research. Welcome to you all, and in the case of some of you, welcome back. I'm always flattered when students actually return, although you probably didn't get much of a choice in who your professor was. My apologies for that. This is going to serve as our first week one Zoom session. My apologies about that. I much prefer to do those in real time. But my bosses at LSUS are calling me into service on Wednesday night. So I would not be available to you, and I prefer not to give walks. So I'll use this Zoom session in a recorded fashion for you, and perhaps be able to answer some of the questions that I would anticipate from you all anyway. So I'll just walk down my list of things. By the way, in case you don't know it, there's a total of 106 of you, and you're scattered all over this planet. They're every corner of the United States, and then we got folks in foreign countries. At this point in time, I am aware that we have students in Saudi Arabia and in American Samoa, and probably other points I haven't discovered yet. Some of you are educational leadership students, and some of you are CNI, Master of Education in CNI, and welcome to both groups of you. Well, for both of you, the coursework is going to be the same, but my focus for the entire show is that of trying to help you develop the skills that you need to be effective leaders. And even this goes for both programs, because those of you that are even in the CNI program, I consider you as teacher leaders, and you never know where your career is going to take you. If my experiences can serve as an example, most of my life I ended up taking jobs and doing things I never intended to do in the first place. The course, I want to talk to you a little bit about the course. It's framed around the ELCC standards, and that ELCC is the Educational Leadership Constituency Council. They have developed school leadership standards, and those are actually national standards. And so I frame all that stuff around the ELCC standards, and here's why. Most of you at some point down the road are going to be taking some sort of a credentialing exam. Whatever state you're in or country, you're probably going to be taking an exam to get credentials for some higher level of leadership or a role. And although those standards are almost always deeply embedded into those examinations. So my efforts in all of your assignments is to pull you back and make you connect the dots with those ELCC national standards, mostly to make it a habit for you to think about what you're doing, what you're reading, what you're consuming, what you're saying, what you're producing in the context of how it fits into that overall big picture. Please read the syllabus carefully. I try very hard to keep it fairly tight and fairly clean with regard to the information that I'm sharing with you. Most of you have discovered at this point that there is no textbook required. One of my favorite things about working at LSU Shreveport is that they don't make me use a textbook. And so all of the content that I'll be feeding to you every week is fully open source and free on the internet. And I find that my students like that, but I like it in particularly because I don't feel compelled to be wedded to just one primary resource. I can expose you to thought leaders in our profession over a wide spectrum, and some of them well respected, highly known, and in some of the content that you will be exposed to is stuff from just average everyday folks like you and me that are laboring away in the salt mines of education on a daily basis, but pretty smart folks nonetheless. The whole concept of graduate research in general is premised, the underlying premise is science And that's based on a couple of things: critical observation and skeptical analysis. And one of my goals for you in the course is to help sharpen your minds in that respect, so that when you're consuming content, particularly research, you do it with a very critical eye. You don't ever take it as valuable or true on the surface. I hope to help you train your mind so that you're very skeptical on all the things that you encounter with regard to research and proposals for practice and products that people will try to sell to you as time goes by. Now, I want you to be skeptical, but I don't want you to be cynical. A skeptic is someone that's going to look with a very critical eye and ask deep and probing questions. A cynic is just going to be dismissive from the start and not even go to the trouble to think about what they're being cynical of. So I want you to be critical. I want you to be skeptical, and that consequently, as the term unfolds, I think you'll get a feel for the kind of mindset that you and I need to develop, a very disciplined mindset in the way we approach and consume research in the educational field and in the field of leadership and organizational behavior. Let's talk about course structure for a minute. If you look at the week 1 module in Moodle, which is the only one you have access to right now, you'll see that I have it broken into 2 components. The top up there I have as learning enhancements, and that's the stuff that I'll feed to you that I think will aid and abet your learning in the process, but it's stuff that it's just there for your help and support. You're not graded on that stuff. And then in the bottom portion, you'll find a banner that says learning tasks. And those are all graded. Every week, I'm going to pitch to you 6 learning tasks. The first 3 will be me feeding content to you. Sometimes I'll feed that content in the form of documents. Sometimes it might be a book chapter or a journal article, or even blogs. Sometimes it could be videos, and occasionally I'll even throw in someone's PowerPoint presentation that they've done at a conference, and from time to time I'll pitch a podcast at you. But you'll get 3, the learning task 1, 2, and 3 every week will be content that I'm providing to you. Learning task 4 and 5. 4 and 5 every week will be you doing some hunting for research. And if you look at the syllabus I've given you in the resource area, you'll see that I've given you access both through our Noel library here at LSU Shreveport, and also Google Scholar has a very robust academic search engine for scholarly articles and research. I'm going to ask you twice every week in Learning Task 4 and in Learning Task 5 to go out and find some research. And when I say research, I mean research. I don't mean a journal article. I mean an actual study. And in those learning tasks, you will see that I narrow that down, the stuff I'm wanting you to search for on a particular week in direct relation to the ELCC standards. I'll clarify that a little more later in my comments. And then learning task 6 every week is going to be the discussion prompts that I pitch at you through the discussion board. Most weeks, I'm just going to pitch 2 of those at you. And most of the weeks, it's going to be something I'm going to ask you either to give us something reflective, often from your personal experience, or as time goes by, I'll be asking you to take a look at the comments and the contributions that your classmates have made in response to our assignments and comment on those. The final exam will occur in week 7, but don't worry, it's not anything that you have to study for. And you'll have it in your hands far in advance of week 7, actually. And the final exam, it's not going to be something that a whole list of things that I think you need to be learning. When I ask for final exams, it's mostly you providing some very reflective and deep thought into what it was you learned from the course. and sharing that in a very public way. The weekly modules I will open those every week no later than 7 a.m. on Monday morning. Most of the time, those get opened up earlier than that, but I can promise you it will never be later than 7 a.m. on Monday morning of that particular week. Your assignment deadlines are always the same, except in week 7. The assignment deadlines are always going to be Sunday evening at 11:30 p.m. I've had a number of students say, why can't you make it midnight? And here's why. Because the wizard behind the curtain that handles Moodle at LSU Shreveport designates 11:30 p.m. on Sunday night as when they turn everything off and they do their updates. So you couldn't even turn stuff in at that time anyway, because Moodle goes dark on us. Week 7 is different. Week 7, your assignment deadlines, all of them for that particular week, are due on Saturday night at 11:30 p.m. And here's why. On our accelerated format, our 7-week format here at LSU Shreveport, the university makes me get grades in on Monday morning at 10 a.m. So I simply cannot grade through all the work of 106 of you between 11:30 Sunday night and 10 a.m. Monday morning. So on that week 7, all of your assignments will be due on Saturday of that week. I will open that week 7 module a few days earlier than usual, so you can get a jump on that if you like. Every week we'll have the Zoom sessions at 6 p.m. on Wednesday evening. This week is an exception, and I've already mentioned that because my bosses are calling for my service somewhere else at that time. And that was very late notice, by the way. I would have avoided that if I could have. But weeks 1 through 6, we'll have a Zoom session. And I do not use those as a lecture format. I will make comments to you, and most of the comments that I'll make to you during those live Zoom sessions are in reference to the things that you've posted in your assignments or on the discussion board, and dots that I may be connecting or responding to your questions. And really, the Zoom sessions I like very much for them to be Q&A sessions with you and me, so that you all can gain a deeper understanding and clarification either about the things you're learning or about the things that I haven't been very clear about. We will not have a Zoom session in week 7. Since your final exams due that week, I spare you one more painful session of listening to me blather on. All the Zoom sessions will be recorded, and so when I record those, then I'll post them in the Learning Enhancement section of the weekly module, so you can go back and take a look at those. Please know that if I say it in a Zoom session, you're responsible for knowing it. Even if you cannot attend live, which many of you cannot, I understand. Some of you have school responsibilities, many of you have family responsibilities. We're all over actually, literally all over the planet, so some of you are deep in sleep at that time. And some of you are actually working in classrooms at that time. But I record those. I'll store them in the weekly module for that week under the label, the week 2 Zoom session recording or something along those lines. You've probably figured out that, or seen already, if you've not actually opened the module up, that I require you to submit all of your learning in Google Forms. And one of the primary reasons that I do that is so that you're all being asked exactly the same questions every week, and you're all being asked exactly the same questions on each assignment. And I'm able to collect all of that work, all 106 of you have done, in one document and share it back with you. So everything, just know this, when you're turning in your assignments and submitting your work, that your entire class will be able to see what you have said and what you have learned from that learning task. what I do is at the end of the week, after I've graded through most of that stuff, usually it occurs on Monday, sometimes as late as Tuesday. What I will do is post in the learning enhancement section of our weekly module a thing that the label that says collective learning. And in that bucket, I will share all of your responses to the week, the learning task 1 from the week prior, the learning task 2 from the week prior, the learning task 3 from the week prior, 4 and 5. Obviously, learning task 6 is the discussion forum, so you will have already seen all of that stuff. When I'm grading your work, I don't require a scholarly paper, and I don't require essays. I've tried to craft meaningful questions that cut to your learning. And when I'm grading your work, what I'm looking for, by the way, you've seen the rubrics on the syllabus, so you know you have some sense of what gets you a complete credit grade and what's partial credit. But when I'm grading through your stuff, I'm looking for evidence. I'm looking for evidence of critical analysis on your part. 7-week terms go by at warp speed, and we don't have near the time to percolate and process that we would in a normal 15 or 16-week term. So I'm asking you, obviously you're not consuming as much content, so I've tried very carefully to give you content that covers the spectrum and also triggers some deep thought on your part. I'm kind of persnickety, unapologetically, about APA citations for your work. And that's one of the questions that I ask on every one of your assignments. What is the appropriate, accurate APA citation for this source, the source of this content? I've given you an APA cheat sheet in your weekly modules. It's already there. And so, in fact, I think it's even in front, above week 1. And what that allows you to do is make some sense of how to appropriately cite the work of other people. Bottom line, the formula always works like this. Who created the content? That's the first thing. And we generally use their last name first and then their initials. The second part of that formula, first part is who created the content. The second part, what year was it created in? What year was the content created? Third part is, what's the title of it? If it's an article, what's the title of it? If it's the book, what's the title of it? If it's a TED Talk, what's the title of it? And then the very last part of that 4-point formula is, where did it come from? If you were reading a book, then it would be the publisher. If you were reading an article in a journal, then it would be the name of the journal. If your source is an online source, for instance, a video from YouTube, then you would cite the appropriate URL. So what you're doing is telling other learners like me and your classmates, if you want to read what I read, or you want to consume the same content I consumed, here's where it is. Who created it, what year it was created, the title of it, and where to find it. Who, when, what, where. Every week, already in week 1, you see what I call the Sandbox Forum. It's the EDL740 Sandbox Forum, and that's the place to ask questions and get answers, and not just me giving the answers. And I see some of you have already begun playing in that sandbox, seeking out advice and guidance and wisdom and counsel from your classmates. Good for you. Post questions there, and anybody in our group of 107 learners that knows the answer, you are free to pitch your answer in there in response. The assignment receipts, when you do your submissions in those Google Forms, I've configured those so that you can ask for basically confirmation that I received it. So that's just part of the function there of that Google form. And so you should be able to know if Google caught your response. If you ever have questions, you can email me. And those of you that have already emailed me, I think will already attest to the fact that for college professors, I'm extremely responsive. I will always be back to you within 24 hours, and usually much sooner than that. I actually do not live in Shreveport. My wife and I have a ranch out in West Texas, out between Lubbock and Abilene, Texas. I'm about 1,000 miles from Shreveport, and because I'm a rancher as well, my work day looks something like this. I'm usually working, doing work for you all, sometime between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m. And then I get out and work with my cattle or build fences or do whatever my lovely bride, Mo, of 42 years, tells me to do. And then I come in the middle of the day, have lunch, do some more LSU work, and then I'll go out in the afternoon and do a few hours of ranch work, and then I'll finish my day up doing some LSU Shreveport work on your behalf. So consequently, you get, I'm constantly monitoring what you all are doing throughout the course of the day so that you never have to go very long without a response from me if you need it. Let's talk about the weeks, the focus from those weeks on a week-by-week basis as we march ourselves through the course. And you can find a similar version of this in a syllabus. But week one is basically, from a content perspective, it's an overview of educational research. And then in relation to your research, the two articles or the two studies that I'm asking you to dig around, look for, I have tied those to the ELCC 1, Standard 1, which has to do with vision. And there are several topics in there. You'll see it if you open that Google form up, and I'm asking you to say, what area here am I going to try to find some research that interests me? So every week you'll have a little bit of a variety and choice as your interest and your current job role or your aspirational job role would define. You have some variety and option in the way you chase down those articles and look for those studies to read and dissect. Week two, the total, in week two, the concept, if you will, the theme of that week from a content perspective is crafting research questions. And there takes a lot of skill to develop a research question. One, that really cuts to a very important point, and two, is something that you can actually measure, and three, is something that you actually stand a chance of being able to collect some reasonable data on. So that's an art in itself, but week two focuses on crafting research questions. They have to be specific and tight and measurable. And then from your research mining perspective in learning tasks 4 and 5, I'm asking you to focus on ELC Standard 2, which has to do with student achievement. Let's move to week 3. Week 3, we will focus our content study on the topic of qualitative research, qualitative tools and methods. And a qualitative research is basically about the context and the stories. And then on your data mining or your research mining learning task 4 and 5, I'll ask you to focus it generally in terms of ELCC Standard 3, which has to do with organizational management, the management component of our work. Week 4, we'll change the focus and the content to that of quantitative tools and methods, and this is the numbers stuff. Cranking out those numbers, and many of you are accustomed to looking at numbers, but particularly on standardized tests and those kind of things. And then for your research mining and learning tasks 4 and 5, your focus will be on the ELCC Standard 4, which has to do with collaboration and community. Week 5, our content focus will shift to that of literature reviews, and then our learning tasks 4 and 5, the research mining, will shift to ELCC Standard 5, which has to do with integrity, fairness, and ethical decision making. In week 6, The content portion of our work will shift to questionnaires, surveys, and interviews. And the research mining part of our assignments, learning tasks 4 and 5, will shift to ELCC Standard 6, which I call, they don't call it this, but I call it contextual astuteness, which basically is understanding the political lay of the land and being able to function therein. Finally, in week 7, as you already know, well, no, I say that. You already know you got the final exam coming at you that week, but from a focus, from a content perspective, and yes, week 7 will look exactly like weeks 1 through 6 as far as your responsibilities and assignments. But week 7, the content part will be focused on theories of learning, because this has direct bearing on the way you and I make a living. And then your research mining will be focused on the topics related to ELCC Standard 7, which has to do with internship or mentorship, if you will. Your final exam will be in 3 parts, and you can see that on the syllabus. 1, I'm just going to ask you, what are the top 10 things you learned from the course? Pretty easy, and you can start working on those on week 1 if you want to. And then the second component of the final exam, I'll ask you on each one of those ELCC standards, standards 1 through 7. I'm going to say standard 1 has to do with vision. What assignment or learning activity that we engaged in this term that you think is most aligned to ELCC standard 1, vision? And I'll do that with standard 2, standard 3, and so on, right down through standard 7. And then final part of your final exam will be, you'll be giving me the nuts and bolts components of a research proposal as if you were fixing to launch a study of your own. And that will come to make more sense as you begin digging through the research that you look for during the term. But bottom line is, the final exam is something you could be starting on right this very minute if you want to. More power to you. Some of you, on the topic of the research proposal, some of you, without question, some of you are probably already working on a doctorate, but some of you that aren't already will most certainly do that. And if and when you do pursue a doctorate, you'll have to take whole courses in quantitative research and qualitative research. In fact, most doctorates will require you to have about 18 hours of what we call tools courses, the actual tools of research. 7 weeks are going to fly by in a hurry, sports fans, so buckle up tight. If you have a question, ask me. You either ask me directly by email or ask me in that sandbox forum, and I'll fire back. If you think your question is relevant to the whole party, put the question in that sandbox forum, and either I or somebody else quite often beats me to the punch. But ask, and you'll find that I'm always responsive to those that reach out to me. I will mention through the course of the term, especially in the Zoom sessions, quite a number of books that you might want to put on the list of your professional references as time goes by. I know you're all in grad school. It seems like I spent half of my life in grad school. And I know we're giving you all the stuff that you can stand to read, but if you want to visit my website, you're welcome to do that. Nelson W. Coulter at nelsonwcoulter.com. It's called NC's Recursive Learning, but on my website, I have a tab specifically with book references on there. So if you're interested in seeing some of the books that have impacted me in a positive way, you're welcome to take a look at that. By the way, I read a lot of stuff. I'm a terrible sleeper. So while many of you are sleeping, I'm reading. But I promise that you'll not see a book on that book recommendation list that's a bad one. All of them have been, I read a lot of crappy stuff, but I don't put that on my recommendation list. Okay, I'm going to shut up. Again, my apologies for not being able to live stream with you this week. Circumstances beyond my control. Use me as you need me, and let's enjoy this learning journey together.